Good afternoon, Spurs fans, and welcome to the American Hotspur pre-match build-up. Spurs versus Manchester United. Before we get into it, make sure that you do hit the like and subscribe buttons and also hit the notification bell so you do not miss out on any of the upcoming content. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Joining me this afternoon, or should I say this evening for all the boys over there across the pond, he is one half of the dynamic duo of the Irish Hotspur. As a matter of fact, he is the Irish Hotspur. By the way, man, one of the greatest Spurs YouTube communities right now. And of course, he can be heard also on the Irish Lads Talking Spurs as well, too. A very, very talented content creator. He is the leader of the Harris Army, by the way. Don't forget that. Don't forget about that as well, too. It is Dave Harris of the Irish Hotspur. Dave, how you doing, my guy?
Yeah, look, very, very nice introduction. Very kind of yourself. I haven't had an introduction like that in quite some time. Yeah. But yeah, look, I'm keeping well, off the back of a 4-0 win. Look, don't get me wrong, it doesn't gloss over all the problems, but a win makes you feel good, right?
Well, it's interesting that you said that, too, because I have to preface this by saying that it is FC Copenhagen. And I don't mean any disrespect to the Belgian Pro League, but that being said, we're supposed to do that to a team from the Belgian Pro League. Period, point blank, end of discussion. The comparison in skill is just not there compared to the Premier League. So from that standpoint, yes, it was. But I guess the bigger thing is, before we actually dive into it, give me your impression of this last week gone by, because it seems like we went from one extreme to the other. Against Chelsea, I don't know how you felt about that, but I was left with a sour taste in my mouth. As a matter of fact, I was actually pissed off, because it just seemed like the boys were just disinterested. Generally speaking, at least through the first 13, 14 matches of the season, at least there was some kind of drive, even though that, even though this team is generally set up to be a little bit more defensive than attacking, but at least you can see some of the passion and you can at least see some of the drive in some of these games, even in losses. But this Chelsea match was absolute dog shit across the board. It almost felt like they were throwing darts at a dartboard hoping something would stick. Meanwhile, they rebound against an FC Copenhagen, so it's one extreme to the other. I'm curious to know exactly how you feel about the inconsistency right now.
Yeah, look, I think, that Chelsea game was extremely disappointing, and that comes off the back of the Newcastle game where we sort of sacrificed the cup in terms of team selection, for that Chelsea game. So I think everyone is expecting Spurs to come out at Chelsea, and, Thomas Frank sort of alluded to it in the pre-match press conference, that was the game plan. However, it failed to materialize on the day. We just couldn't get going whatsoever. 0.05 XG on the day sort of explains everything, right? Jamie Carragher came out and said, on Monday Night Football, it was like a League Two side in the FA Cup versus, a big team. And he was absolutely spot on. It was nowhere near good enough. And, it left a real bad sour taste in my mouth, and I think many Spurs fans' mouth. That was a 3 days that was sort of hard to get over, and it left you with so many questions, so where is this project going and stuff like that. But, a good win against Copenhagen, and all of a sudden the good feel factor is back again. But look, it's Copenhagen at the end of the day. They're like fourth in the Danish league. They're like bottom of the Champions League, phase. With not really much of a chance to get out. So, the quality of the opposition wasn't great. So it's not really a great barometer to sort of measure us off. But what I will say, it was about being having the confidence and building confidence heading into these games. So let's wait and see what sort of team turns up against Man United, because I do believe it's one of them games, Stevie, tomorrow that if we win, all of a sudden all the noise quietens down and all of a sudden Tottenham are top 4 contenders. If we lose, there's a chance we slide down, into the bottom half of the table if results don't go our way. And then all of a sudden you're left questioning the project again. But I think in general, there's been a big problem, with fans and, their opinions and people saying it's negative and that all the time. But the reality is it's the inconsistencies that sort of bring around a lot of that. It's very rare do you find a fan nowadays that just goes, it is what it is, move on and happy clap all the way through the week to the next game. They just doesn't exist anymore. There's a lot more demands, a lot more expectations and stuff like that. And it's just one of them, like we've been here before where there's been inconsistencies and usually things end up tailing off and going in a certain direction. And I think, there's still many question marks to be asked around this project, but, one win against Man United could change everything, Stevie.
Yeah, and that's my biggest concern. And I think you and I would probably agree that the appointment of Thomas Frank was a good one. And one of the things that I think you and I were both talking about over the summer was just that the ability to be consistent from from match to match to match to match. It's one of the things that we just haven't necessarily had at this club in an awfully long time. But that being said, I don't necessarily know if we're necessarily seeing that. It just seems from the fact that Thomas Frank, at least in my perspective, doesn't know exactly what his best 11 is. And it seems like there's a need for rotation, and it just seems like every single week we're seeing something completely different. Whereas, like, I'll give you a good impression, right? Give you a good example. When Sean Dyche was sacked from Everton, they brought in David Moyes, and it stabled everything right away. Now, granted, we have better talent than Everton did when that happened. But the reality is like there's certain coaches that'll come in and everything will just stabilize. And every single week we're going to see what the team's identity is going to be, whether it's for good or bad. And for whatever reason, I don't necessarily know if we're seeing that. And I don't necessarily know if this is a Thomas Frank issue. I don't necessarily know if this is a club issue. I don't even know if this is actually a talent issue, whether the player's on the field, or even if it's a leadership issue. Like that's the troubling thing for me right now is I can't necessarily pinpoint what the hell is going on.
But the thing is, though, Stevie, I think we are seeing Thomas Frank implement his style on the team. I just don't think it's exciting as everyone thought it would be. That defensive solidity is something he brought around at Brentford. Maximising set pieces and corners is something he's maximised at Brentford. At Brentford at times they did the odd time, create some good attacks and look maybe a bit better on the eye. But in general, I've never really classified Thomas Frank as a guy where his football is pleasing or good on the eye. I've just always classified it as effective. And I suppose you can argue that's exactly what you're seeing. I think what we're seeing is a guy that maybe some of his inexperience at this level is sort of starting to show. And what I mean by that, Stevie, is that, I think this is one of my big questions when we brought him in. How is he going to handle the domestic campaign alongside the European campaign? He's never had to do it before. There's a massive difference between having 7 days on the training pitch at Brentford and looking to develop players and being able to do that and get your game plan across and it being effective than what you do when you've only got one training session in between games now because they're coming in so thick and fast. And I think you are seeing him maybe struggle with that. That's why he's continuously changing things up. Like his idea of rotation is, well, it stops players from getting injuries, but we've had more injuries than what we had last season. So it's sort of like that theory doesn't really wash. It's sort of like, and I think not putting out your best 11, especially in the front line, putting out your best attacking front line and continuously change it up, I think is disrupting the rhythm. That's why we're not seeing us, develop any real relationships. And that's why we're sitting here in the middle of November with no real relationships formed or anything across that front line. Like, one of my big frustrations is like everyone goes like he hasn't been given tools to work with. He's been given kudos. Xavi Simons, João Paulinho, Kolo Muani. I think it's a fair question to ask. Is he getting the most out of them? And what I mean by that is, if he was getting something out of a few of them and nothing out of the others, you'd say, okay, yeah, that's the quality showing. But when you're getting nothing out of any of the options you have, at what point is it down to the system and the tactics? And at the end of the day, I'd said Frank's biggest jump to Tottenham will be the style of football. Spurs fans may sit here now and say they'll tolerate it, but when the reality hits and it's put into practice, it's not going to be pretty on the eye. Are you going to tolerate it? Because one big factor everyone overlooked when we hired Thomas Frank, and it's something that I tried to point out, his Brentford team had some of the lowest possession stats in the league. That was never going to fly at Tottenham Hotspur. He was always going to have to bring a better brand of football. And I've seen many managers before where there's been a huge fanfare around them, and I've sat there and said, it's not going to work. For instance, my big one, Graham Potter to Chelsea. Everyone's it's gonna be brilliant, match made in heaven. It's not gonna work. He's not gonna command the respect of better players. It's just gonna be the case. Nuno, he's good for like a Wolves or a Nottingham Forest and dragging him up the table. He makes a step to a big club. He's never going to survive the brand of football. And a lot of these managers have problems adapting their style of football, because at bigger clubs, there is better expectations. You are expected to play a brand of football that is palatable on the eye when you've got better players to work with and stuff. And I think there's a fair argument to say we're getting exactly what Thomas Frank was brought in to do.
That's interesting because I do think that in certain context, I think he has gotten out the best of certain players. I would contest that he has actually gotten the very best out of João Palhinha. I think we're seeing peak João Palhinha,
Yeah,
especially
defensive
for that.
players,
Yeah, for sure.
not offensive
Right.
players.
Well,
No.
and I think something interesting happened in that FC Copenhagen game. And I don't necessarily know if this was planned, but we saw Xavi Simons attack from the right, not the left in that game against FC Copenhagen, and he actually looked like he was having fun for the first time in his Spurs shirt. Coincidentally, he ended up having his best game in his Spurs shirt. I don't know if you felt that, but I actually thought he was absolutely dangerous in that match. Now, granted, again, FC Copenhagen, I have to take a step back and and put it in its context. But that being said, when I think about Xavi Simons, and I'm like, okay, cool, Dutch national team, he plays underneath, attacks high as a 10 off the right side. When he was at Red Bull Leipzig, exact same thing. It almost feels like that. It feels like that. That side of the pitch, it seems to suit him a little bit better. I understand it's only a 1 game sample size, but when you look at the smile that was on his face and you looked at the way that he was taking chances, that's something that he wasn't doing on the left-hand side. He was trying to do too much on the left-hand side to potentially overcompensate, but it felt like it came natural to him on the right side.
Look, I actually think, I agree with you. I think he did have one of his best. I think he's had his best game to date against Copenhagen. But again, he's not going to get that time and space in the Premier League. I think one thing he done very well, though, Stevie, is I do hear you about sort of down that right-hand side. It was him that set up the Brennan Johnson goal. But I also think he worked very well with Udebur. There was times he done some lovely link-up play with Udebur down the left-hand side. And he also linked up with Mwani a couple of times. And that's something that I haven't seen a Spurs player doing quite some time in that position, which is sort of have a relationship with all three across the board. But again, we're up against better quality opposition in the Premier League, more physical opposition. He's not going to get that time and space. My only hope is now that he's built that confidence, and you can see the confidence in him, he's doing tricks and flicks and stuff like that. Hopefully now that'll give him the sort of confidence boost he needs to be able to start performing against the better teams. Because I'm not being funny, but I didn't pay 60 million. We didn't pay 60 million for him to turn up against Copenhagen. I'm not being funny. We could put out some of our under 21s and they could have put in a good performance. We pay him for the games like tomorrow. Let's see if he can transfer that into tomorrow's game, because the biggest problem he has is just the physicality in the Premier League.
Speaking of which, Manchester United is tomorrow at the stadium. Interesting thing, this isn't last year's Manchester United. As a matter of fact, this team actually looks dangerous at times. They actually gotten some pretty good results. A lot of that has to do with some of their summer transfer business. But that being said, I also think for those that that participated last season under Ruben Amorim, I think the expectations of what Ruben Amorim sets in for Manchester United, I think that has actually been heard. And I actually think some of these players are a little bit more comfortable now, understanding exactly what is expected of them, their positioning on the field, and I think they're just far more comfortable. It also doesn't hurt when you get a guy like Brian Mbeumo through the door. It almost transformed their attacking front line. Same thing with Matías Cunha. But that being said, first and foremost, how do you see this match tomorrow? And is there going to be an area of the pitch that we're actually going to have an advantage over them, or is this about as even as it gets?
Look, it's not going to be an easy game tomorrow. They have made a resurgence up the table. I think they've scored the same amount of goals on us. They're on the same amount of points. So, if they win, all of a sudden their season is preparing for, seeing if they can sneak inside that top 4. But likewise, if we win, it sort of puts us in that direction. But with Man United, a lot of their wins this season have come when they've had less possession than the opposition, which shows they're better on the counter-attack. And I think when you're coming to Tottenham Stadium, I think that's the way you play. If you don't have the ability to go and press, you sit in and hit us on the counter. It's been something that's been rinsed and repeat for quite some time at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The reason why is because we don't have an attack that can kill you off. You put bodies behind, we don't have an attack that can break you down, and you'll always get a chance up the other end, and they back themselves. So, if I'm Man United, I'm expecting them to really come here, sit in tomorrow, and look to hit on the counter. They beat Liverpool playing that way, they beat Chelsea playing that way, and I presume they'd probably think they can beat Tottenham playing that way, even more so. United, we do have troubles against teams that come and press us. Look what Newcastle done to us at their stadium. Look what Chelsea done to us. But the reality is, United don't have.
Look at look at what Bournemouth and Wolves did to us at home as well too. It's like that first 10 minutes is essentially going to dictate the entire tempo of the match. It's certainly gonna dictate how how we're going to react.
100% it will, but the thing is, I don't think United have the legs in the team to come and press. Their backline don't have great legs in them, and also that midfield. So I think naturally they are just going to come and play that sort of counter-attacking game. So for us, I do expect us to have our line share possession, but again, it's what we do with possession. We had possession under Postecoglou a lot of times. We've had possession at times this year, but we're very lackluster with it. Where we will have the numerical advantage will be in the midfield. They play a midfield two of Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes. Not great legs between them, but they are sitting in and protecting that back three pretty well. So, that's where we're going to have the numerical advantage. And let's see, if Franks has come up with a clever idea to sort of make it count, But at the end of the day, he has to start João Palhinha, because if United are looking to counter-attack, well, there's no better man in the league to counteract that. I think he's made, 44 or something tackles this season, more than anybody else in the Premier League. So if he can pull down the counters, then it's really on Rodrigo Bentancur and how he sort of dictates the tempo. Is he just going to move it side to side, or is he going to move it at pace, and is he going to move it in between the lines?
That's very interesting. Yeah. The interesting thing is, I'm curious to see exactly how our shape is going to be up the pitch, right? It's not just on counterattacks. It's how we're going to build up. One of the things that I noticed against FC Copenhagen was the same way we set up a little bit against Everton as well too. It almost felt like we were playing like a 4-1-4-1 a little bit, right? We were attacking with two high tens. With that runner on the right as well too. It was weird because at times it almost felt like Brendan Johnson was hugging the touchline, but there was other times where he was played in as well too. And he looked absolutely dynamic. That was the weird part about it. Not the fact that Brendan Johnson actually played well. It's the fact that he actually looked well. It looked like his movements were movements were good too. Same thing with Wilson Odegaard on the left as well. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think we look best when we're actually attacking with two high tens. It actually allows a guy like Xavi Simons, depending on who's going to be on that other side as well too, whether it's going to be a Papstar or maybe even obviously it's not going to be Lucas Bergvall. He's out. But that being said, it's like, me personally, I look at it and I'm like, for everything you just said about speed, on Manchester United's back line, in their midfield, me personally, how we attack direct is probably going to dictate. Me personally, I don't know how you feel about this, but me personally, I just feel like if we play a little bit more direct, attacking with two high tens, it's actually going to free the wings, and it's also going to allow Randall Colomani maybe even an advantage inside the box as well too.
Yeah, well, I think when you attack with the two high tens, you're sort of putting players in between that half space, right? In between the centre and the wing, and it's a very sort of awkward position to pick up. Anyone that goes to pick it up is essentially stepping out of position and creating a gap through the middle or out wide that you essentially don't want to give up because you're opening up passing lanes. So it is one of them where it does cause a little bit of chaos. But for me, I think he should only really be playing that if he's looking to play Kudus as the other side in that number 10. Xavi on the left and Kudus to the right. And I think that's the only reason why he's sort of come up with that against Everton and against, I think he tried it in some other games as well, is to try and free up more Kudus because we were coming so predictable because everything was coming down that right-hand side. And that was for a number of reasons. Jed Spence is right foot playing on the left. So naturally, his instinct when he gets the ball is to pass back inside, which means you're seeing a lot of that horseshoe football. So we had to come up with a different system to stop more Kudus because you're starting to become double and triple marked and teams were getting at what they done last season. If you stop Spurs down the left, you stop Tottenham, and they're doing it this season. If you stop Tottenham down the right, you'll stop Tottenham. But I think the big key for me is actually Destiny Udogie coming back in at left back. You go back to the game against Leeds, we looked good. We were dynamic going forward. Same against Copenhagen. Our two best attacking performances come when Destiny Udogie is playing on that left-hand side with Wilson Odegaard. And the big difference for me is because he's left-footed, he can dribble directly at them, or he's looking to open his body and play it down the line rather than inside, which then means you're becoming a lot less unpredictable because you now have a threat down the left and you now have a threat down the right. So in theory, Thomas Frank can't play that 4-2-3-1, nor that 4-3-3, whatever way you want to cover it up, if he wants to. But he can only really play that when he has Destiny Udogie available on that left-hand side. When you have Jed Spence available, that's when you do have to maybe start playing with your 2 number 10s and stuff like that, because you lose a lot of the speed and the directness in your build-up play and what you're trying to do. So when Udogie's there, I would like to see him sort of play that 4-2-3-1.
Interesting. Yeah, no, and I would actually agree with that as well too. I'm actually one of the many few that actually think that Destiny Udogie, along with Cudi Romero, jump right back into the 11 for exactly that reason as well too. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the 1v1 defense that Jed Spence has, but let's be real though. Me personally, I think it's isolated. I think it's isolated to certain opponents. But that being said, it's like when I think about the counter, no matter what formation you want to throw out there, I think you just nailed it right on the head from an attacking standpoint. And the interesting thing about it is people want to talk about the lack of service into the box from a guy like Destiny Udogie. The same could be said with Jed Spence as well too. Like I don't want to hear it. Jed Spence's service into the box isn't any better than what Destiny Udogie actually throws out there. And I'd probably say that the ceiling is even higher with Destiny Udogie to actually develop something a little bit more dangerous in the box. I actually thought he was perfectly fine this last game. But that being said, I want to ask you this specific question, right? Because me personally, I think the advantage that Spurs are going to be in the midfield as well too. Is there a specific midfield 3 that you're looking at that you actually would think that this is actually going to work out far better than what we've seen?
I know a lot of people have a problem with the double pivot of Bentancur and Paulinho. Me personally, I don't. I'm with you. I actually really like it. I think, the double pivot is there to sort of ensure on the defensive solidity. And I think that's one thing that people miss. Like everyone wants Bentancur to start adventuring forward and break from the role. But the reality is that's not what Thomas Frank is asking for. He was asked about Bergwall earlier on in the season, potentially playing there. And, the answer that he gave back in the press conference was, we have to keep screaming at him and tell him to stop running, which highlights he doesn't want them 2 players sort of breaking the lines in attacking phases. He's more than okay to wait for set pieces before he sends them up there. He actually wants them to sit in there and protect that back line and allow his fullbacks to push on. And I think with Rodrigo Bentancur, like Paulinho is perfect in there, right? I know Jamie Carragher had a go at him the other day for not really, he's too defensive. Reality is he's got 7 goal involvements this season. He's got 4 goals, 3 assists. He's our club's second top goal scorer. So I think Jamie Carragher misread that one on that situation. At the end of the day, he's got the highest number of any, highest attacking numbers of any midfielder that we've got in the squad right now. But when it comes to Rodrigo Bentancur, he is there to be able to transition the ball. He's calm head even when he's got 2 or 3 players, pressing him. He's very calm in possession, and often than not, he plays his way out of that trouble. And what he does is he draws players in, and that creates a space for him then to poke the ball into and for others to run onto. And I think a lot of people sort of miss that when it comes to Rodrigo Bentancur. And the reason, again, why I'm even more convinced it's instructions, because what people are asking of Rodrigo Bentancur, I've seen him do underneath Antonio Conte. But the difference is Antonio Conte gave him the license to get forward, while Højbjerg sat in and was the more defensive of the 2. So what people are asking for, I've seen Rodrigo Bentancur do. So it's not like he's just refusing to do it now. He's become any less of a player. It's simply the instructions given by the manager and what he's asking him to do. But in terms of the double pivot, I think it's perfect. You've got one that breaks up play, and you've got another one that gets on the ball and keeps it moving. A bit like what Wanyama and Dembele used to do for Tottenham.
Oh yeah, that's a very good call. Me personally, I like his passing ability. I think it's one of his most underrated qualities is the fact that he does have the ability to break lines, especially if there's a turnover right around midfield. He does have the ability to get the ball forward. But you're absolutely spot on about it. The thing that I also like about it is the fact that I think there's a relationship between him and Paulinho. At this stage, I like it. It's one of the very few relationships outside of our center back pairing that actually understands exactly where everybody's going to be on the field. Right, one can go do work while the other one sits back. Right, both of these guys have the ability to put out fires if needed, understanding that their backside are 100% taken care of. Right, at the same time making sure that the back 3 are covered as well too. Yeah. So from that standpoint, it's one of those relationships that I don't. I do not want to see that broken up this weekend.
The thing is, Stevie, I'm a big fan of Papa Matasar. And I like
I am
Bergwijn.
too.
The reality is, when one of them play with either Rodrigo, Bentancur, or Paulinho, we don't carry the same presence. We don't control games sometimes in the way you do with a Paulinho and a Bentancur. And I think a
Right.
lot of people miss that.
Hey, I got a question to ask you. What was the reasoning behind dropping Pap Star from the starting 11? Just out of curiosity.
That one, I don't understand, especially since Xavi Simons wasn't producing. I think, especially the reason why I don't understand it is because the guy was the main source of all the goals preseason and the opening 6 games of the season. He's involved in nearly every single goal that Tottenham Hotspur scored. If he didn't score it himself, he either assisted it or turned over the ball that led to that goal. And I think, when we brought in the likes of Xavi Simons, I think Frank maybe felt the pressure to sort of introduce him from the off and try and bring him in. And maybe there was a part of him that wanted to evolve sort of Tottenham's attack and play and try and make us a bit more better on the eye. And that was maybe the whole idea of maybe accommodating someone like Xavi Simons. But I think it came back to Frank's detriment, to be honest with you, because the minute he took him out of the team, we started sort of losing games, and I think he sort of lost that momentum. That midfield tree of Sarr, Bentancur, and Paulinho were really building. At the end of the day, I get that Sarr's not your traditional number 10 type, but he'll press high up the pitch, which means then you don't have to play 10 passes to get in. He can turn it over, play one pass. He gets into the box on the end of things. He shoots from the edge of the box. He does offer something different, that maybe other players don't offer in that position. And I think, at one stage, I was looking at Sarr, Bentancur, and Paulinho and saying that's probably one of the best midfield three in the Premier League. And I think by dropping Papa Matasar, I think Frank has lost that sort of momentum that it was gathering. And now all of a sudden he's got problems in there.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask is because I think you hit it right on the head, is the fact that he lost his momentum, right? And I was one of those guys that were like, well, this is actually kind of a good thing, because you can strategically use Pap Sarr as a chess piece, whether that's in the 55th, 60th, 65th minute coming on and actually strategically use him. But he's a much different player coming off the bench than when he was started. And the fact that he was dropped, essentially quickly, he's lost all his momentum to the point where the last couple of performances we've seen from Pap Sarr, really aren't all that.
Steve. Because
by the way, I'm not blaming him. Yeah. I'm just saying it's like it's evident that he lost his momentum from how he started the preseason to the start of the regular season, and it seems like now he's just it seems like he's a different player. That's all I'm saying.
No, 100%. And if you're Papa Matasar, right, and you're giving everything to the cause, and you're clearly the best player in the team from preseason all the way through, and then suddenly you're dropped, it just goes to show there's no reward for playing at a high level. He didn't keep his place in the team. And I think that sends out a bad precedent to everybody else. No wonder why you're starting to see the inconsistencies, because all of a sudden, when you make that call, performances doesn't matter. What matters is the price tag. And that's essentially what happened there. I also think Frank is to blame for Xavi Simons not getting off to the best possible start. He didn't need to accommodate him straight into that number 10. I think, and it's one thing I flagged. The physicality and the climatization for Xavi Simons is going to take him a while to set in. Now, I'm not being funny, right, but if I can see that, then what the fuck is everyone getting paid for inside the football club? What's all these coaching staff, this magnificent coaching team that he brought doing? At the end of the day, for the first while, he was hanging out on the left-hand side. When you've got problems in your team down the left-hand side, that's where you throw him in. It's not like he's alien and he couldn't play there. He played there for Leipzig at times, Yeah. So my point is, you should have kept Sarr in the team and kept that midfield tree and introduced Xavi Simons off the left. And then if performances start dropping for one reason or another, or you want to give Papa Matasar a rest, or you want to, take him off or whatever, then you can move Xavi Simons inside and introduce him slowly that way. I just think Frank, sort of got ahead of himself in that regard. And to be honest with you, I think that decision killed Spurs' momentum.
Yeah, and it certainly killed the goal production of this team as well too, because it almost felt like through that first 4, 5, 6 matches of the season, it just felt like this team, not only could score, but was able to dial up something a little bit later in the match as well too. Especially if they were behind, they had no problem dialing up a goal to try to get back into it. It almost felt like this team had turned a corner. And I think I was vocal by saying that, good teams figure out a way to get a result. But that being said, as the season's progressed, this team actually hasn't found results. As a matter of fact, it's found reasons to lose. And so that's, it all gets, to me, it all gets back to, this whole consistency thing, and whether or not, there were mistakes made between the October window and the November window. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, look, 100%. I think there were mistakes made. Like, at one point, we only had two problem areas, which was left wing and striker. It was clear, it was evident. All you had to do was drop Xavi Simons in on the left wing, and all of a sudden, you're just waiting for Mawani to come back, and then all of a sudden, you don't really have many problems. But once he took out Papa Massar and tried to play around with it and bring Xavi Simons in and stuff like that, all of a sudden, he's created a headache, and all of a sudden, there's more problems in the team than what there really needed to be. And I just think that decision there to try and accommodate Xavi really, really killed the momentum we were building. I just don't get it. For me, it's bad management. If Papa Massar is the source of nearly every goal, you keep the guy in the team.
Yeah.
Even if you don't fancy him as your number 10, you reward the guy for performances, and you say to everybody else, if you perform like this, you will stay in the team regardless of who we buy or what other options I've got. You will keep your place. By taking him out, all of a sudden, everyone else is looking at that and going, well, I mean, if he's performing like that and he can get dropped, then I don't need to be at a certain level every single week and stuff. And I think that hasn't helped them either.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And the reason why I asked this is because tomorrow, and I think you and I have been vocal about this. And I don't know if anybody else has been parroting this. It's the fact that I still think Xavi Simons would still be best for this team out on the left. Now, don't get it twisted. I like Wilson Odobert, and I think he's gotten better. I think his development curve has actually improved to the point where it's like I think you can play him week in and week out and not necessarily worry. Now, the only thing I think the last thing that comes in the development curve is GA. That's the last thing that really kind of shows up, really. But that being said, you can put him out there, and it's not going to be that big of an issue. I still think that Xavi Simons is still the best for this team on the left-hand side just because of the space that's going to be given. But that be it. And me personally, I think the midfield three should be, Polinia, Betancourt, and Son. I brought it up because, specifically for tomorrow, and just the way that Manchester United sets up and the way that they play, I really do believe that we are going to be in a little bit of a better position through the middle of the park with those three, specifically those three. Depending on who they have to drop to make a touch, whether it's off the half turn, you play it forward, whatever the case may be, or if you're going to play it on the wings. Me personally, I just think that midfield three is kind of perfectly suited to play against Manchester United and how they're going to be trying to set it.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think it's what I liked about the midfield three is I thought they were robust. I thought they were competitive, combative, and I think they caused a lot of problems. A lot of teams didn't like going through Tottenham's middle, and I sort of agree with you. But, unfortunately, I don't think Frank is going to go at that midfield three. I think he is going to play Xavi Simons in the number 10. And to be honest with you, I think he's got no option off the back of the Copenhagen game. If he wants to try and, personally, I think he's mismanaged the kid, in terms of the way he's been using him. I think he's killed his confidence. But it looked like he was confident against Copenhagen. It looked like he actually enjoyed being on the football pitch again, which was good to see. So I think you have no option but to play him in the number 10 and give him an opportunity against United. Because if you don't, all of a sudden you're going to drain the confidence from the kid again. At the end of the day, he played man of the match. He could have walked off the pitch with 4 or 5 assists. I mean, Mawani missed 2 sitters off the back of chances he created for him. I think, Johnson missed a sitter off the back of what he created for him. He also set up Johnson's goal. So on another night, he could have come off with 3 or 4 assists to his name. So I think off the back of that, I think Frank has put himself in the position where he now has to play Xavi Simons in there. Whether it's the right call or not remains to be seen. But he has to now. His hands are tied, I think.
I would agree with that. Unfortunately, I would absolutely agree with that. So that leaves an attacking three of what? Kudus, Kolo Muani, and Odobert against Manchester United, correct? How does that sit with you?
Oh, it depends whether Kudus is fit. I know Thomas Frank said he's touch and go, right? So
he's touch and go, yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if he's fit. Look, for me, I think if Kudus is fit, I think he has to start. I don't want to hear this about Brennan Johnson. I know he's got 4 goals to his name this season, but the reality is he's played against a lot of the weaker opponents. He hasn't played against some of the stronger opponents and stuff like that. And, he scored against Copenhagen the other day. It was a great ball over the top by Xavi Simons. But again, it's left questioning what else does he do when he's not played in behind? And you can't afford to carry a player against Man United. At the end of the day, when he plays down that right-hand side, he's constantly passing back or inside, which means, again, you're getting, when you're in the final third, he contributes to a lot of the horseshoe football because he doesn't want to take the responsibility of getting on the ball, beating his man and stuff like that. And also, I've been around a long time to know Copenhagen were a very, very weak opposition the other night. In possession and out of possession. There was so much space all over that pitch. Honestly, if we showed more aggression in the first half, we could have had them for 6, 7, and 8 there Tuesday night. They were that bad. Against Man United, you're not going to get that time and space in terms of to execute your decision-making and stuff like that. And if we go based on what we've seen against tougher opposition this year, they've managed to stifle our attack. So that's where I think someone like Kudos is even more important because he has the ability to be able to pick up the ball, drive at opponents, similar to Colin Mawani, beat his man, create a bit of chaos. So if you're not going to break them down, then you need someone that has the ability to win you free kicks, set pieces, put balls in the box and stuff like that. And Kudos is that guy. So I think it's very important that he starts on the right-hand side. Udebur, look, I actually think, out of all the options we've seen down that left-hand side, he's technically been the best. He's what I like about him is he encourages me to get out my seat because when he gets the ball, he wants to go direct. He wants to go at his man. He wants to take him on and cause chaos. That's what a good winger should be doing 9 times out of 10 when he gets the ball. So I really like that about Wilson Odobert. Where the frustration comes in is some of the end product. But again, he's young, he's raw. That's going to take a while to click. But he scored the other day against Copenhagen. Him and Udogie do have good link-up play down that side in general. So for me, he has to play off the left. And Kudos is Mawani is the only guy that can play down the middle, Steve. Richarlison is done at this football club after Tuesday night. Missed sitters and then took a penalty off a young kid, which I don't think he should have done. And he's just nowhere near the level. With Mawani, before the Copenhagen game, we didn't put him in any positions to have a strike on goal, which is absolutely shocking. But you go back to that Chelsea game, we were just punting balls long aimlessly.
Yep.
It was his endeavour to go after them and cause a nuisance that actually sort of gave us our very little attacks that we did create on the evening because there was nothing else coming into his feet or anything like that. It was just his pure work rate and endeavour to go and hump ball down and make something out of it that really sort of tried to drag Tottenham forward. And I know he missed a couple of chances the other night.
Yep.
But that first chance he missed, when I went back and watched it, what I loved most about it, now of course not him missing, but was he actually, in that moment, took his time and, decided what finish he was going to do. And I just think a sharper player would have executed that. And what I mean by that is, often when Richarlison and Solanke have been put through, there's no real thought about their finish. It's almost like panicking when they're striking the ball, just hit it towards goals. Whereas with Mawani, you can clearly see he made the decision to try and put it in that corner. And I just love that. And from the CNI test, with his link-up play with other players and stuff, again, something Richarlison and Solanke have failed to do and struggled to do. I've seen more than enough that he passes the CNI test to know with more match sharpness that them goals are going to follow. He is genuinely an all-round good player. I really like what I see, and I think the goals will come with him, Stevie. He has to play up front because when he does, we can start linking up. There's relationships there. There's 1-2s. When Richarlison plays up front, very hard to get link-up play when you don't even know if the guy's going to control the ball. And 9 times out of 10, you're seeing players not gamble when Richarlison's up top because they don't feel like he's going to hold up the ball.
Is there any worry with Mawani potentially camping in Manchester United's channels tomorrow? Just considering that it's who's their starting center backs?
You've got the Lenny Yoro on it, either Shaw or Maguire. I'm not sure if Maguire's injured or not. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any worry about Mawani up against that back 5 or that back 3?
No, not for me. I'm not too worried about it, to be honest with you. I think he has the legs on the lit. I think once he moves off the lit, what he can't afford to do is stand static. If he's static up front and he's just waiting for that one ball all day long, the lit will have his number. He'll just, get physical with the guy and clear it all day long. What the lit isn't good at is being dragged around the place. He's not mobile enough for it. And that's where Mawani will have a good day. If he runs off down that left side, which sometimes I think Luke Shaw plays left-sided centre-back, he's going to absolutely roast him. Doesn't have the speed and that or the mobility to keep up with him. And likewise, whether it's Yoro or Maguire, I think Yoro probably will have the physicality to keep up with him, but I think Moani will have too much smart up here for him. So for me, I'm not really too concerned about it. At the end of the day, though, it's not just solely on him. Can we create him the chances? I've no doubt from what I've seen, he's got the movement. It's just about, can we provide him the chances? Because what we can't expect him to do is pick up the ball and become Lionel Moani and beat 3 players and put it in the back of the net.
Lionel Moani. I like that, by the way. Yeah. So are you predicting a goal from Moani tomorrow? Is that what you're saying? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so. When you look at that United team, although they're set up very pragmatic, they concede a lot of goals. I think they scored 17, conceded 16. So they're there to be got at if we want to.
Fair enough.
But you got to show them no respect, though, Steve. You got to go for it. I think I've seen a stat today, and this sort of tells the difference. And this is why, again, I think it's under instruction from Thomas Frank on why we look so lackluster going forward. Is because Man United, although they play teams on the counter, they have the second most shots on goal in the Premier League, just behind Liverpool. They're not afraid to pull the trigger when they go at teams to go direct. They're not afraid to put balls in the box and stuff like that. With us, we're down the bottom for like nearly, we're near the bottom in terms of shots, but we're up the top in terms of conversion rate. So it sort of shows that we're more callous in picking our moments rather than taking risk in possession. And that's where I think Frank lets himself down, because at the end of the day, going forward, it's all about risk. That's the most exciting players that get people off their seats, players that take risks, players that will try things, players that will, outside of the usual mundane instructions. And that's where I think Frank is letting himself down. I think he's got Moani, a great sort of a good maverick. You got the likes of Simmons, the likes of Kudos. To be honest with you, them players aren't really that hard to manage. As you can see, with them players, the biggest thing is, will they work hard out of possession? All 3 will work their nuts off out of possession. Sometimes you got to go and let them play. You got to go and let them feel the game. It can't be so regimented where you're like, well, if you're in this position, this is your option, this is your option. No, let them play what's in front of them. Let them go and play off the cuff. And for me, I think that's the biggest thing. Is Thomas Frank going to take the handbrake off and allow these players to put the ball in the box more and gamble, put Man United under pressure, actually make their defenders defend, actually make their goalkeeper make saves? Are you going to allow, the Cam or Rodrigo Bentancur to push forward and get in the box so that when we are crossing balls into the box, we've got numbers in there? And I think that's the big difference for me. Thomas Frank puts the handbrake on this team too much. If we want to beat Man United tomorrow, it's no good just having possession. You gotta have purpose with that possession. If he takes the handbrake off and lets us go at them, put them under pressure, they will crumble. If we're trying to be too clever and pick and choose our moments, there's a chance they can win this game.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest concerns for me isn't necessarily us going forward. And yes, that is still kind of a big, that is a big concern, because for everything you just said, one of my biggest concerns is numbers in the box. We just don't seem to stack the box unless it's on a set piece. But that being said, it's also on the defensive side. And this is something that is actually I've been thinking about for the last couple of days. And it's not necessarily shots in the box, because whether people want to agree to this or not, we actually do a very good job of not letting opponent attackers actually get free shots in the box. Chelsea notwithstanding. But that being said, it's like when you look at what happened against Aston Villa, where did they score their 2 goals? Outside the box. And this is something that I've been thinking about the last couple of days, because when I think about Bruno Fernandes and I think about some of the other pieces that they actually have, and their ability to utilize space outside the 18-yard box, whether it's on the left-hand side, mostly on the left-hand side, the ability to actually turn in space and actually get a shot fired off. And obviously we understand exactly what Vicario's Achilles heel is right now. And it's not point blank saves. As a matter of fact, he's actually very good at saving the ball in tight spaces. It's handling his ability with shots from outside the box. And I'm just looking at this thinking to myself, okay, cool. Because if Manchester United are going to play that way, they're going to be selective with how they're going to get forward, when they get forward, and how they're going to attack the box. I would probably assume that they have video on Vicario. and they understand exactly where his weaknesses are and exactly where our weaknesses are setting up. And when you think about that right-handed side, off that left side with the that combination of Rodrigo Betancourt, Pedro Porro, and depending on where the positioning of Cudi Romero is going to be, there is going to be opportunities to attack from that left-hand side outside the box.
No, 100%. Look, I think, that's one of our biggest weaknesses is we don't recognize the danger sometimes in and around the edge of the box. We're almost sort of like, well, it's outside the box. It's grand, sit off. Whereas for me, we've been punished for that, If you see a player ready to pull a trigger, go out and close it down. It's not difficult.
Right.
At the end of the day, you got to realize you're playing the best league in the world. You're going to get punished. Maybe in other leagues you don't. This league you will.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so we're gonna close in on close this one out. I'm curious to know exactly what you feel like your best 11 is for tomorrow.
My best 11, I think, obviously Vicario in goals. Kinski, he's just not good enough at shot stopping. We've seen that against Newcastle. So Vicario's got to be in goals. I think Pedro Porro has to play down the right back. I know there's a call for maybe Spence to come in and defend against Cunha, and that maybe Pedro Porro needs a rest. However, that left-hand side defensively is Man United's weak spot, and that is an area that I think Pedro Porro could exploit. Especially if we're not as good as we were Tuesday night going forward. Pedro Porro has the ability to be able to cross the ball, put balls in behind and stuff. So I think he has to play. Romero and Van de Ven, of course, would be your centre-backs,
Yep.
and I think Destiny Udogie, like I already explained, he has to play at left-back because he will help us again going forward and be more dynamic with a lot more speed. Double pivot of Rodrigo Bentancur and João Paulinho. And then for me, I think he will go with Xavi Simons in the 10, Udebur off the left, if Kudos is fit, him off the right, with Mwani up front.
And
then
yeah, no, I would...
And the reason why is because, just quickly with Simons in the 10, if United are going to sit low block, you do need that guy that can put the ball in over the top with a bit of delicacy and stuff like that. But I would say if that doesn't work, then I would look to get Papa Matasara in there and look to put more crosses in the box and instruct him to get in there and double up with Mwani and get after it. That's the way I would approach the game personally tomorrow.
Yeah, that's interesting. A big part of me thinks that Kudus, like he said that Kudus is touch and go for tomorrow, and a big part of me thinks that Brendan Johnson might be on that right hand side tomorrow again. I don't know why. I don't have any inside information. As of right now, I'm assuming that Mohamed Kudus is going to be available. By the way, what's the nature of the knock? By the way, did we find that out?
No, I'm not sure. You just reported that he was carrying a knock, And look, to be honest with you, I can understand it. When you've got 2 or 3 players trying to hack at your angles, hack at your legs, eventually you're going to feel something. And because of his importance to the team, we don't have the ability to be able to rest him and stuff like that. So we've just had to roll him out there and sort of help him play through it. But look, I don't think he trained Thursday, did he? He wasn't seen training Thursday. So maybe that could be an indicator that he might not be fit for Saturday. But I'm just hoping Thomas Frank is playing mind games.
That would be, here's the interesting thing, right? Like, I wonder whether or not this might be an opportunity to switch formations, just considering all things considered. And when you look at what we have versus, what we're going to have available versus potentially putting them in the right positions to succeed, maybe this might be an opportunity where we start in a different formation. But that being said, I would probably assume it's going to be a 4-3-3. And I agree with you. I thought Kinski was fine against Newcastle, but that being said, you could still see the mistakes when pressure situations arise. You saw the mistakes, and unfortunately, against a team like Manchester United, again, Newcastle punished them. Manchester United would punish them again, and this is something where until we actually have a serviceable backup that is actually on the same level with the same quality as a guy like Vicario, I don't necessarily think it's much of a race when it comes to goalkeeper one. I think that's Vicario's pretty much every single week, unless we rotate like in the FA Cup or a team like FC Copenhagen in the Champions League or something along those lines. I also agree with you. It's got to be Pedro Porro on the right. Here's the thing, and on the pre-match build-up on your show as well too. I think this was a couple weeks back where I think this might have been against Wolves, where I actually called for Jed Spence to be on the right, just because it seemed like it was a good opportunity to potentially give a guy like Pedro Porro some rest. It turned out that came to fruition, and Jed Spence didn't really look all that great on the right-hand side. As a matter of fact, he actually was one of his worst performances on the right. That being said, I would think that, if Pedro Porro is able to continue to compete like this and actually kind of play the role of the Iron Man, where you can actually do this type of thing, where you can actually put him out there every single week, then you're going to have to continue to do it, because unfortunately, it almost feels to me like Jed Spence is now a left sider, not a right sider anymore. And from that standpoint, against a team like Manchester United, I just think I think the drop off is too massive, and the last thing you want to do is give Manchester United, areas in the pitch where they can actually take advantage. So from that standpoint, Pedro Porro is at least a serviceable defender, to the point where he's not going to necessarily allow opponents to burn him. So from that standpoint, he's going to start for me as well too. Obviously, Romero Van de Ven, Destiny Udogie on the left, and again, it's not even close. Me personally, I think Destiny Udogie, again, and I'll say it again, he's the type of player that walks right back into the 11 when he's fit and healthy. And I thought he actually had a nice little warm up against FC Copenhagen, to the point where I have no problem putting him back out there against United.
Yeah.
Same thing with the double pivot. Yep, Polina, Betancourt. I would agree to that as well too. And again, me personally, I like relationships. I like pairings on the pitch as well too, and those two seem to have like nice little kinship going for those two. And I don't want to see that broken up. And I would agree with you that he's probably going to play Xavi Simons in the 10 as well too. It just is what it is. My attacking three, I'm going to have Udabert, Mwani up top, and I'm going to actually start Brendan Johnson on the right. Part of me really does believe that Mohamed Kudus is going to be out for tomorrow.
Well, look, I mean, you go by Spurs medical history, we get told, potentially these players are back, and then all of a sudden they're not on the team sheet whatsoever. And look, that very well could be the case. I hope not, because, we're gonna need them heading into this festive fixture period for sure.
Adrian from Spurs Diehards TTID says, I think Kudus will play because we have the international break to follow.
Yeah, well, he could. I think AFCON is also coming up, in soon, isn't it, as well? So he is going to want to sort of go out there and be a part of things and stuff. So look, we'll wait and see. But at the end of the day, even if he is available, but if he's carrying up, maybe it is of the club's best interest to maybe not play him. Let's wait and see.
All right. So is there an early score prediction from you?
I don't think we're going to blow Man United away. Likewise, I don't think they're going to blow us away. It's 12:30. I think the first half is going to be a non-event while players wake up. I think second half, for me, I think it's going to be a tight game. It's either going to be 1-0 Tottenham or 2-1 Tottenham.
Interesting. For the sixth straight week, I'm predicting a 2-2 draw. And again, until there's evidence in the Premier League that this team is capable of not only taking an early lead, but also holding an early lead, and not conceding, I'm going to continue to stick with that scoreline, because unfortunately this team does have a tendency to concede, and it doesn't look good when they do it. What I will say is, specifically for this match, the first 10 minutes are going to dictate how this thing is going to play out for me. There is a blueprint on how to beat Spurs at White Hart Lane. Let's be perfectly honest. Bournemouth started that trend when they were high pressing and essentially bullied us off the ball, and they were able to dictate and control the flow of that match. And Spurs, unfortunately, were left to react. Same thing with Wolves. Same thing, even at up at Newcastle. From the opening whistle, they bullied us off the ball. Chelsea bullied us off the ball. And even though that Manchester United might not necessarily be known from that, you would probably have to think that even if they're not going to high press, if we're playing out of the back and they're going to high press, at the very least they're going to be playing a mid block, right? So as soon as we cross the midway line, they're going to start pressing at that point, and unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of disruption, especially if we're going to try to play direct through the middle of the park. And a big part of me thinks that there's going to be some sort of game plan where they understand that if they just tighten the screw a little bit, we're going to come completely fucking unglued tomorrow. And we're going to know that within the first, we're going to know that in the first 10 minutes, Dave. And so from that standpoint, I actually want to see how this team responds after being absolutely humiliated against Chelsea, right? This is a perfect opportunity in front of your home supporters. And especially coming off a game, off a game like Copenhagen. That's kind of what I want to see. I want to see them put the flag down. I want to see them put a marker down and just let somebody know it ain't playing like that today, homie. It ain't doing it. We're not playing this game today. As a matter of fact, you're going to have to take our lead for this one because we're not going to allow you to breathe for a long stretches of period of time. And so for me, it's not only matching intensity, but it's also figuring out ways to look decisive when scoring goals, taking advantage of your opportunities. Because I would probably assume you're going to be right. If Manchester United is going to give us the ball, then we're going to have to do something than looking like we're just throwing darts at a dartboard hoping something sticks.
No, 100%. Look, I think the first 10 minutes is absolutely crucial. I think, there was a bit of goodwill, after the Copenhagen game, but if we start off lackluster and show United too much respect, a lot of fans, the life will be sucked out of them again. They're like, well, we're in for another 90 minutes of this shit. So I think how we start will actually dictate the sort of fans' mood for the rest of the game. At the end of the day, it's a 12:30 kickoff. Usually they're quiet enough in general, in terms of people are still tired and half asleep and stuff like that. So for me, I think we got to go. I think we got to try and start fast. Got to put them under pressure and show intent that we want to go and score goals. Put the ball into box, have shots, test them nice and early. I think naturally that'll bring the fans along with them. I think for me, what I don't like, what I'm seeing is fans starting to become the scapegoat for everything wrong at Tottenham Hotspur, when realistically fans are the only ones that have actually tried to sort out the atmosphere by trying to liaise with the club and stuff like that. And the club have turned them down at every opportunity when fans have extended and put their questions about the atmosphere and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you got players now like Vicario, Frank, stuff like that. People questioning the Spurs fans. Who do you think you are? We're here long before you, and we will be long after you. Don't you question my support. I question, what you're doing at this football club. At the end of the day, there's no accountability for anyone inside the club not wanting to liaise with fans. There's never any accountability for the managers sometimes, and also never accountability for the players. They all just find it far too easy to throw the fans under the bus, and I'm not having it. At the end of the day, Thomas Frank said before the Chelsea game, he said, obviously I need the fans on my side, and if we could create a good atmosphere, that'd be brilliant. But then once the game kicks off, it's up to us and how we play. That will drag the fans along with us. But the way we approach the game killed the atmosphere. Don't do the same against Man United. Learn from that and go fucking at them.
Yeah, 100%. And I will say, lastly, before I close, you know how much I love Mickey Van de Ven. I got a solid bromance with Dutch center backs, man. Me personally, he's my favorite Tottenham Hotspur. But that being said, I think he was one of the two after that Chelsea game because of how bad that game played out. He didn't even go support the supporters. He went straight to the tunnel. And I think there was a lot of discussion there because I think it could have even been Thomas Frank who was like, no, you got to go over to the supporters, right? And that being said, I think you said it absolutely eloquently right there that it's too easy to blame fans. But that being said, even after a humiliating performance, the last thing you do is disrespect fans by not acknowledging them, not acknowledging the support. Me personally, I think it's actually kind of bush league, to be honest with you.
I just find it ironic that they're blaming the very people that have no effect on the outcome of the game. They literally pay to watch the game. They have no effect on what happens on the pitch or in the build up to these games. But yet they're the people being scapegoated. Work that one out.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. I want to thank Dave for taking time out tonight. And of course, tomorrow morning I will be on the pre-match build-up on the Irish Hotspur, and of course that's going to be like 2:30, 3:30 in the morning my time.
I think it's going to be 4:30 for you, lad. I think so.
Well, so match starts at 7:30 here, so yeah, 4:30.
7:30. Oh shit, yeah. No, my pre-match build-up starts at like 9:30 in the morning my time. So
yeah, so it's going to be like 4:30. Yeah, so. Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow at 4:30, so that's going to be fun.
Appreciate that. And then you can have a lion if you want.
That's all good, man. By the way, it's never stopped me before, so I'll be there tomorrow morning at your pre-match build-up, 4:30 here on the East Coast of the United States, and of course at 7:30 it is the Hotspur watch along. Manchester United, Spurs hosting Manchester United from the lane. And then of course tomorrow afternoon at 4:00, we have the MLS playoff live stream, Seattle versus Minnesota as well too. So there is a lot of good content here on Stateside Footy. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Any last words, Dave?
Actually, I have one quick question for you.
Yeah.
Ireland called up an MLS player today. His name is O'Toole. Do you know much about him? Plays for New York. Let me get his name.
He's a defender, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know much about him? Any good? Any use?
Is he from New York Red Bulls or NYCFC? New York
City FC. His name is Kevin O'Toole.
There he is. Kevin O'Toole. Yeah, there he is. He's a defender, I believe.
Any good?
Kevin O'Toole. You know what? Good question. I've only seen NYCFC for a handful of matches this year. But that being said, I believe he's a regular starter there, regular contributor for NYCFC. So that being said, if you're starting to dip out of Major League Soccer for your national team, and by the way, the United States does it all the time anyway. So that being said, there are quality players in Major League Soccer, and I'll tell you what, he gets regular minutes there for NYCFC. He's a starter. So that being said, he's in form. It's probably going to help.
Nice. Well, I'll give you my feedback, let you know how he looks.
All right. That's going to do it for us, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I want to thank Adrian right here in the chat. I want to thank Philip King, Nate Holloway, and then Rich Moy here as well, too. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in as well, too. And so until tomorrow, you guys have a great weekend. And thanks again. Have a great night.